So welcome everyone to our VWEC Metaverse Expert Series. We're glad to see you and have you join us for today's very interesting presentation and discussion. Everyone is also invited to an extended chat with our speaker at the other end of the deck for an informal conversation and Q&A after the presentation, if you can make it and if you have time. For those of you who are new, let me share a link to our website in nearby chat. And you can find VWEC on many social media channels also. After our presentation, we will move to the deck for that more informal conversation and social time for those who are able to stay. We're pleased to offer our expert series presentations in both text and chat. So text, for anyone who may not be using voice, is shared on our YouTube live stream. You can find a link in the sign in front of our stage. And speaking of signs, we'd like to know how you found out about our events. So our survey plant has just a quick survey that's great help to us. So if you could please fill that out if you haven't done so already, and feel free to send along any comments you might have. So we'd like to thank you for joining us for this presentation today. I'm delighted to introduce our Metaverse expert speaker, Stephen Gasior, known here in Second Life as Stephen Xootfly. Stephen has a PhD in molecular genetics and cell biology, and as a biology instructor, he decided to teach 3 semesters of non-majors biology in Second Life, from the summer of 2010 to spring 2012. Wanting to deliver more than a lecture class, he took students on Darwin's Voyage of the Beagle, made them breed bunnies, visit Mendel's Abbey at Genome Island, and present and sometimes be an animal themselves. He also developed his own virtual chemistry and chromosome segregation manipulatives and a population genetics and selection simulator in conjunction with Wizardry and Steamworks. He's going to talk to us today about the Engagement Clinic, which is an effort to bring diverse expertise together to combat the problems with conversations we have in our world today. The motto, "Bringing logic and calm to a world gone mad," describes the goal of applying the core principles of rationality, affirmation, and emotional intelligence to learning lessons for everyone. As people experience heated conversations, observe irrational nonsense, and feel frustrated by it all, it worsens the human condition. As a group, the Engagement Clinic wholeheartedly believes that anyone can learn some skills and how to appreciate their state of mind to reverse all the negativity. We conducted a pilot series of classes in the summer of 2025, and this talk is going to cover the basics of that experience. And we'll also impart some perspectives and tips on the organization of the group, which involved multiple experts across multiple time zones. So Stephen is joined by Val Librarian, who was a member of the team that delivered that engagement clinic. And I was also a member of the team that delivered the clinic. So we might all chip in and add a little bit about our experience as we go through the talk. So without further ado, I'm delighted to hand over to Stephen. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Thank you for that introduction, John. And I'm pleased to be here to talk about a unique effort comprised of myself and several other Second Life denizens dedicated to making this happen. While my name is on the poster, I really am here to represent this group as a whole. You know, what is and how did we create the Engagement Clinic 101? And that's for us here today. Now, I'm Stephen Gasior, Xootfly in Second Life, and I'm co-presenting with Val Librarian. What is and how did we create the Engagement Clinic? And the origin story is here. There was a prompting. I credit myself as being the initiator of this, and it's because it felt to me like we live in a world of communication breakdown and bad decisions. And add to that, for someone else's profit or influence, we are awash in disinformation and misinformation. I also had the realization that individually and socially, the biological algorithms are stacked against us in this climate. And on top of that, because logic, skepticism, information parsing, science process are no longer a part of formal education. Now, my question is this something you believe? Please put brief comments in the chat, examples you've experienced of this, maybe just your feelings on it, people you know, groups you participate in, or social media examples. Go ahead and let's just pause for a second to let everyone share some comments about this and thoughts. Don't be shy. Val Librarian mentions especially young people feeling more anxious. Maybe this also FOMO, the fear of missing out. Shiloh mentions, I guess you're talking about John F. Kennedy, who shot him. Yeah, a lot of people are afraid to share opinions, right? People can get bullied or people can come back. Oh, you want RFK Jr. Okay, RFK Jr. misinformation, disinformation with health and nutrition type things. The Kennedy name and conspiracy theories, right? Buffy Beal feels like you can't believe anything you see. Yeah, with the advent of AI. But let's face it, seances back in the 1920s even involved fake photography in order to convince people of ghosts. So yeah, these are all good examples. And I guess also just anybody want to convey some sense of frustration about the situation? Does it get you feeling down? Yes. Wordsmith Jarvinen mentions inoculation theory, where once someone believes something, it's hard to change their beliefs. And that's a key point is, why do people think the things they do? And so this all led me to a decision. And that is, I'm a scientist, and that process is mostly a learned skill, which can be taught. But decision making is more than a logical process. And so I sought additional well-established partners in library science and brain health, Val Librarian and Wisdom Seeker, for example. And we then also strategized and sought out additional partners that came from multiple groups. So we expanded our concept of how to enhance our conversations, our perspectives, sense of self, and all of this to develop resistance to what I call scam formation and more. What we ultimately developed were the overall explicit course goals. For something based on a course on rational and logical thinking to combat misinformation in daily life, including virtual, as well as developing discourse skills for citizenry engagement and emotional intelligence. We delineated specific course objectives, impart knowledge on logical and rational thinking theory, provide skill training on recognizing good versus bad argumentation, provide skill training to understand logical fallacies, misinformation, and disinformation. Develop each student's ability to argue persuasive cases and counter bad faith rhetoric. Provide knowledge of optimal engagement with other people, including understanding their and your own biases and perspectives and engaging with empathy. Develop each student's sense of self and development of beliefs with enhanced ability to reason and to be persuasive with others in disagreement in a constructive manner. I hope you can see how these objectives are aligned to the overall goal and fits into a unique niche that can benefit our current conversations and dealing with information overload. The Engagement Clinic team. You can see the avatar personae on the slide coming from a diverse set of educational groups in Second Life. VWEC, CVL, Science Circle, Whole Brain Health, Scientia, and are members of many more. And many people are members of multiple, the ones I described. Simulat and Wisdom Seeker were not facilitators, but they both provided input and helped market and host the clinic to their groups, Thotica and Whole Brain Health, and that's something we really appreciate. Yeah, I mean, that's all I had in the speakeasy text about this group, and Val Librarian out if you mentioned a little bit more about it, but there was a lot of reaching out to find people that we knew had a really good reputation for doing really interesting engagement and education or science, but not just from the hard sciences perspective, that social sciences and empathy. And, there are many more people we could have drawn from, but, and that's something we can think about in the future. All right, the core principles, Ray. And we built and developed this course on 3 core principles, which form the acronym RAY. Think of it as a ray of light shining on truth. Rationality, learn how to construct logical arguments, evaluate evidence, and distinguish solid reasoning from misleading claims. A dialogue doesn't have to come to an understanding of a universal truth, but we should be able to discuss and feel comfortable about having reasonable conclusions. Affirmation, understand that persuasive communication also requires empathy, recognizing others' perspectives, values, and emotional stakes in a discussion. Understanding the viewpoint of others is key to being persuasive and having constructive dialogue. And emotional intelligence. Develop self-awareness and resilience. Know your limits in conversation, when to engage deeply, and when to step away while remaining fair and kind. Are you incapable of being persuaded by others because you are entrenched in a specific perspective? Even if you can't persuade someone else, can you still treat them fairly and with empathy? In the end, we hope to impart some enhanced understanding of these skills and mindsets so participants, including ourselves as facilitators, can better engage our fellow citizens with logic and caring, but also so that we can emotionally survive and be resilient and thrive as a person in today's world. Now, the class schedule was here, and I'm not going to go through all the specific ones. You can read them on the slide. But we conducted the following classes at the locations and days indicated. Please note the ray emphasis of each class is color-coded. So rationality is red, affirmation blue, emotional intelligence purple. You can see from an overall perspective, these classes are trying to cover a variety of topics that are covering the core concepts and providing a broad base of understanding for each topic. So the nuts and bolts of each class, we leaned heavily into Google Docs to making the slides and spreadsheets and text for the shareable class materials. 1 class per week was conducted on Sundays. They were 50 to 60 minutes each. Each facilitator was responsible for their own content, but also open to feedback. We had a lot of sit and discuss sessions for the materials. There really was a lot of let's all try and find just the right wording, the right perspective, the right graphic to make things really the best we could make them for that class. Now, I'd like to mention something else. We had class prizes. No, don't look under your seat for a prize, but the slides and the text are given to participants. In addition, they're being designed and licensed for anyone to adopt our courses and reuse, adapt, build upon, and instruct after the first official session this spring. We do hope to have maybe informal, maybe formal learning academy to be a certifying body for engagement clinic facilitators. That way, there's a level of understanding and trust about where the facilitator learned how to discuss such topics. But of course, the real product were the students with enhanced engagement skills. The students who take the class leave with new skills and tools for more civil and productive interactions. We hope, incrementally, with more people with Ray, the techniques and awareness can spread. this can address the original why we had the class. And that is, can we really bend the curve that with more people with these skills, the more people they interact with, can this be a way to move away from what frustrated me in the first place? I will now turn over the next few slides to Val Librarian to present.
I'm going to start by talking about the model we had with this open source course. This metaverse course is unique in design. The vision first brought to us by Stephen here lit a spark of ideas because we live in such a rapidly paced world of information. There's little time for any of us to reflect, for reflection and for critical thinking before we're on to the next piece of incoming information nonstop, no matter what age you are, and no matter what field of interest or profession you may have. The educators who participated were in countries across the globe, but they were able to connect and collaborate across distance to develop and deliver this course. Experts from a variety of professional disciplines brought diverse perspectives on logic and critical thinking, which I believe are both on shaky ground in digital culture. My research aligned well to this topic as a professor and researcher of information science. So what were the tools we used for this collaboration? We explored and utilized many tools which are available right here in the virtual world of Second Life, in the interface, and also online tools. We used tools such as networking across Second Life using the Virtual Worlds Education Consortium, where we're sitting today, as a hub to find educators and educational communities. A shared syllabus was created as we met in Second Life, and then we used online communication between meetings. Second Life notifications, note cards, group chats, and group notices helped to market the pilot course. Visits to various educational simulations and communities took place as we networked across Second Life. And I might mention here that the purpose of VWEC, where we are today, is to bring educators together. And there are directories being developed to help teachers and learners find each other, not to compete with each other or different simulations and communities, but to highlight the 3D simulations and high-quality immersive learning opportunities available here in a virtual world. The tools available in Google Drive, as Stephen mentioned, were used for planning, organizing, and sharing course content, such as the 9 modules, the branding, so it was consistent, and the course objectives to assure continuity and clarity. Online calendars were shared across global time zones. This metaverse course is, in my opinion, a good example of an open source model that is dynamic and relevant to today's changing world. So here's an example. Practicing skepticism. I'll share this example of one of the course modules. I taught this session, the second session, Practicing Skepticism. When we are bombarded daily with information in many formats on our smartphones, on social media, podcasts, live streams, and millions of apps, we encounter disinformation and misinformation every day. Teaching a questioning stance has become critical, and I believe it must start at a young age. Digital citizenship is my research area, alongside meta-literacy, which is literacy in digital culture, where print is no longer king. Why is this module important to logical thinking? Well, it helps us foster open-mindedness and curiosity. It can help us become aware of the need for digital citizenship in a post-truth world. It can also help us develop understanding of confirmation bias, which is only natural for all human beings. It helps us discover the importance of taking a questioning stance through meta-literacy. And I'll put the site, the meta-literacy site, in local chat, metaliteracy.org. We're managing too much information daily. Obstacles that block logic and critical thinking include no time to reflect, with a constant bombardment of incoming information on millions of apps. Just this week, I glanced at the woman's phone who was sitting next to me while waiting for an appointment, and it looked like this picture on the slide here. So I found this picture on Reddit, which was very similar. All these notifications, those red dots are constant notifications. Perhaps you've seen someone with the same on their smartphone. This is why I'm here. I'm researching how to teach digital citizenship and meta-literacy in a virtual world. And I've come to believe it's a great place for us to teach it. It's not disposable, it's persistent and sustainable. Here's a visual on taking a questioning stance for young people, the next generation of learners. They face the rise of mental health issues, due in part to social media, constant screen time, and little time to reflect or read and converse with respectful discourse. Embracing a questioning stance with that information bombarding them requires skill. Here together in this virtual space, we are not using a disposable app, but we're working together to learn and to listen and to remain calm through the chaos of digital culture as we face the rise of AI and the intelligence age. I'll speak here for another one of the instructors on constructive emotional management. This module was taught by Mist. Her avatar is Prokrati Mistwallow. She's Dr. Julie Woodbury. Social media has, as I mentioned, caused a rise of anxiety among youth and amplified confirmation bias as we friend and follow people who agree with us. Emotionally charged information is more quickly shared and more often shared than calm, logical information. Mist shared a module for the course that presented effective tools for handling emotions in argumentation in healthy and ethical ways, while pathos utilizes emotion, particularly to persuade. Our world today needs to emphasize ethos, a calm and ethical approach, and logos, rational thinking with clear evidence. This is not always easy in our fast-paced, post-truth world. So I think I speak for all the instructors when I say, thanks, Stephen, for this opportunity. And I'll turn the mic over to you.
Thanks, Bell Librarian. And it was a pleasure to work with everyone. The class topic I taught was science method. And the main class point was that science has skepticism as a core part of the process. One example of this is in science is Popper's concept of falsification, which is fundamental to science versus mythology, stating that theories that are permanently immunized from falsification by the introduction of untestable ad hoc hypotheses can no longer be classified as scientific. The daily process of science is the following, and this is the illustration that you see to the right. New ideas or theories lead to testable predictions. Experiments are designed to test these predictions. Inconsistent results mean theory falsification. And as a reminder, mythology is not falsifiable. Now, what's extremely interesting about this particular falsification of a hypothesis is that it ingrains in the scientific method to be skeptical of your original idea. Within this class topic, we also talked about the overall structure of the scientific enterprise leading to what we call scientific, quote unquote, fact. The basic layered structure of science is such: experiment, the basic unit structure of science, see Popper; article, a collection of experiments making a case about some limited topic; bodies of work, the public dissemination and review and criticism of the article on some topic; and the big idea, which is a unification of the bodies of work over time, solidified into a working unified theory from which others can make new predictions. These unified theories are most commonly described in our sources of truth, i.e. textbooks, encyclopedias, as a basis of thinking. The scope of the idea can go from how a gene functions, cause of a disease, a novel subatomic particle description, to evolutionary theory, origin of the universe, quantum chemistry theory. And again, one of the key things about trying to teach students about the scientific process is that elements of how good ideas are conceptualized in this formal sphere can also be adapted into how one thinks as an individual. So final thoughts on the course. We had a nicely unified set of organizers, really all dedicated to the goals of the group. The instruction seemed popular and well received. We enjoyed it and thought it was worthwhile so much that we'll do the Core 9 classes again this spring. And while hard to measure, we hope people are having less frustrating conversations and enhanced resilience. And we welcome your feedback. And in particular, if any students who took the class are in the audience, there does seem to be some time left in the hour, please share your experiences. Or again, we can discuss during the post-talk time, depending on how John would like us to organize the follow-up. So thank you all for your time and attention. Look for that next phase of announcements for the engagement clinic, and hope you learned something from today.
Thank you very much indeed, Stephen and Val, for that recap. It was very interesting. I hope it was interesting to everybody, but certainly interesting for me to be able to sit back and listen to all of that, having been involved in it. So we have a time for some questions or comments or suggestions. If anybody would like to take the opportunity to ask Stephen anything else. Max says she was only able to attend a couple of sessions last spring, but she's really glad we're repeating it. Great. Me too. I missed a lot of them because I just happened to be very busy. So I'm looking forward to getting to the ones I didn't get to. Shiloh says she was going to suggest maybe journaling for those who attend. That's an interesting idea. What do you think, Stephen?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, is that, and I presume Shiloh means like journal their experiences in the class, and then as they go out into the world and have, further conversations, what do they think about it? What I would love to see, and we've bandied this idea about, is what if we had an engagement clinic Discord or a blog, and then that would be a place where people could chat and share experiences and then other tips and tricks. So again, we're still in early phases of being an organized group, and so we'll see how that goes, but that's a great suggestion.
And Worsens points out, of course, that part of the problem is that many people will only listen to statements made within their own information bubble. So we're all living a tendency to live in echo chambers, don't we? And that was really one of the things behind the whole engagement clinic, was to try and break that. Liz asks a good question, Stephen, and we discussed this. Will we be able to record any of the classes? I'll let you address that.
Yeah, recording is always a fraught with danger, right? Like somebody's voice might keep going out when it didn't before, and then what sort of product are you putting out with that? I think what I would what I would suggest and what I would think we would do is if we have a nicely developed set of courses, is that instead of recording the classes as they occur, that we would do a standalone recording of just the instructor with the main lessons of any class, and then turn that into some sort of video package content. Because I would love to do that. I think having this persistently available is great. But then also the interaction we try and have in classes. So again, one thing I didn't mention too much is that we try to have engaging activities during the class itself so that people can both learn these skills and reinforce them within the class, and maybe even some homework that's involved. And so we would feel that even if there's a video recording of the lessons, then the engagement clinic itself could really focus more on that skill development and role play and exercises. So I love that way of taking it. We'll see how much time and effort we can do to actually make that happen.
Yes, I think it wasn't called the engagement clinic lightly, and I think we certainly found throughout the course of delivery that the discussion in the class and the engagement with people really helped to reinforce what we were talking about. In fact, that's where it emerged. And we've tried to do less and less talking at the class and talking at people, and more looking for examples and samples and different ideas that we could then encourage people in the class to discuss. Because we do tend to learn more from having to grapple with questions and think about them. And it's quite interesting when you're listening to something, it sounds quite logical, but when you have to practice it and begin to apply it, it's quite different. Yeah, Shiloh, a little bit like a debate group, because we're all. I think one of the interesting things about this group, from the community perspective, from our own, is that that old chestnut that if you really want to learn something, then teach it. I found that was particularly useful because the class I taught wasn't a class I had taught before, so I had to really put a lot of work into figuring out what I was talking about before I started to try and construct something into a class. But we were largely all equals. So having that discursive approach, I think, was what made it an interesting session and why people wanted to come back and were happy to come back and engage.
And to follow along with that, I think one of the really cool things we could do with this, like I said, with the Learning Academy, is I found this to be really fun to find everybody's perspectives. And I would think there'd be value for people in saying, hey, how can I be a facilitator in order to even just interact with all the other ideas that are happening and the development of the class.
Tagline, that's a really interesting point you're making in chat there about the illusion that science is something that's totally settled rather than a continually moving space. And we're all learning, and some of us teach as well. But if we ever forget that we're all learning, then that's when we get into trouble.
Actually, and John, can I also address Tagline's point there in that
Yeah.
in the process of my being a biology instructor, that's what I was realizing, is that we do tend to teach the facts we derive from science, and then we don't really go into the process of science. And one thing I wanted to do for my own learning is I developed a philosophy history of biology in order to more teach process of science. And I even have an OpenSim simulator version of virtual epidemiology that's focused on that, trying to teach people process of science. And so I think Tagline points out a really, really important thing. And then again, like I mentioned in my slides, is that the process of science teaches us some of these core key skills dealing with information processing, skepticism, taking a skeptical stance, logic, deduction. And I think, again, that's my perspective, and that's a part of what really was this persistent voice in the back of my head is, Stephen, why don't you do a class or have some lesson or something that teaches this to the general public and not just tuition paying students at a 4-year college.
Yes, and as Val says, the process is more important usually than the product. Um, Stephen, would you like to maybe address one of the other aspects of what's emerging from the engagement clinic? And it's one of the aspects that particularly appealed to me from the beginning, which is that we'd like to try and make the results of this open source, and in order to disseminate far more widely, we're looking at trying to develop something that others can use, um, both in virtual but also in physical spaces.
No, I'd happily like to address that. I totally also want to hear what Val has to say about it too. In that, you know, we really like the virtual world collaboration setting we have here. But these materials, if we have very clear instructional ideas, the slides are very clear and concise, then anybody who, you know, educator, scientist, librarian, sciences, uh, you know, counselor, a lot of people have a lot of these inherent skills where then they could retake this package and convey it in, you know, with their own spin or bits and pieces or even build upon it. So one thing we would potentially love to do would be to have a engagement clinic 200 level classes that go into any topic at higher depth. And so we feel that because this is pretty clear, anybody with, you know, a reasonable experience in these skills could take parts of it and just keep disseminating this for other people's opportunity to get better at these things. Try and bend that curve away from all the world gone mad that's really frustrating and in the way these days. And so, I mean, Val, is there something more you want to say about the transferability and portability of the ideas?
No, that's just one of the reasons why I'm involved, is that you can take what you're already teaching and your perspective into this course, and then you can share it with others. And it's really unique because some of us have taught here in Second Life, but not taught something that's been developed by others. And the fact that we can just share it and then other people can take it. And it's very relevant when you think about bringing calm and logic to a world gone mad. It's relevant to everyone. So it's really unique, and we can do it right here in Second Life.
Stephen, what type of you were talking about a certificate. What type of certificate were you thinking of, and how would you devise it or come about it? How would you agree upon that?
Shiloh, yeah, thanks for the question. There are a couple concepts behind a certificate class. You know, there are accredited certificate granting bodies that are associated with universities or other learning institutes. And one thing I was thinking of was getting a partner so that they could, you know, help us understand the process for that. On the other hand, just, you know, if we're talking within Second Life as something that we're doing, we ourselves could just internally develop our own metrics and syllabus of what we think a you know, an academy would be like, and how you would graduate from such an academy. Although a part of that would probably be helping participate in teaching a session of the class. And so, you know, those are my thoughts. It's a loose concept, but it's more the idea that I want to put that out there because we would love to maintain this branding idea, which is it's an engagement clinic, right? We're trying to do lots of things within the Ray concept, and then have it be something where people feel like they're getting a credible learning experience because someone else is quote unquote certified for that instruction.
And Shiloh is asking word about the certification in relation to Caledonia.
Oh, and Sophia has a really interesting, intriguing idea about having a research project. So yeah, I think an output, some sort of thesis or dissertation or a build that reflects their learning would be, and it would be a great way to build the content of the group as well.
So tagline suggests that the discussion today is all the more important in the world in which one of the very publicly modeled approaches is that if one lies, and gets that lie out there, it might stick and have its 15 minutes of viral propagation. And if you were challenged on a lie, double down, and making it political in a sense, some will believe it, even though no one can fool all the people all the time. And yeah, we're seeing evidence of that in the world indeed as we look around, aren't we?
And along with Tagline's point, we here in the engagement clinic can't necessarily stop bad actors from lies that they want to stick and doubling down. And we don't have consequences in many cases for that. But if we can build more resilience in people to recognize it's a lie, to not be persuaded and get emotional and pass, and then also propagate that lie because they believe it, because maybe they want to believe it, then that's where we can start settling down this issue.
And Val makes a really important point too about this personal responsibility, and the importance of teaching this to kids from a very early age. And I'd certainly see the engagement clinic having a role in pre-university education for definite, junior level and second level, because it's really an approach that we want to try and embed in future citizens from a very early age, so they can discriminate for themselves. Okay. Any other final thoughts before we draw things to a close? Liz, that's a nice comment from Liz, that one of the greatest achievements is the collaboration of so many different areas of knowledge. And I think that's certainly one of the things that's been very interesting in different disciplines. And deliberately, we're trying to bring as many different voices together to this as possible. Tagline suggests, yeah, we need more money. It always amazes me that education is so poorly resourced, considering it's the most important influencer of the future of our society.
And that's something that, at least in the United States, seems true in various, some states more than others, is that the idea of learning and having schools teach you any degree of value or history that reflects poorly on even past morality are these dangerous ideas. Let's weaponify what education is or is not trying to do. And so there's a lot of, the oppressed in this case is the education system that doesn't have many tools and are at the whim of budgets. And so it's very problematic, and I wish it were different, but sometimes, and that's a part of the prompting for how alternate ways of doing education and continuing education like this can be particularly well placed.
Okay, I think we'll draw the formal part of this discussion to a close, but don't forget we have some time in the casual area afterwards. Can I just thank you all for attending today, and just remind everyone that you will be able to find the recording of today's presentation on the VWEC YouTube channel, along with all of the other presentations. Here's the link. If you'd like a copy of today's slides, they will be available on the board over at the side of the deck to my right. So if you look at the sign for this presentation, you'll find them in due course. And please know that we welcome new volunteers to help VWEC, which is open to anyone interested in teaching and learning in virtual worlds. Join us again in 2 weeks for the next expert series, where we hear from Phil Youngblood, who will be presenting Teaching Critical Thinking in Natural Virtual Worlds. So that's January the 23rd at 1 p.m. Second Life time. So a nice natural follow-on from today's discussion, I think. To see all of the VWEC Plaza events, let's share the link for that calendar. And we mentioned the YouTube channel and our social media. I've got a load of links here to copy for social media that you can check out in your own time. And we're on Discord in the Second Life server. Use hashtag education if you're interested in volunteering, or contact Val Librarian Greg or Ellie Pinion or Sue Moon Magic. So finally, I would just like to thank our speakers this evening. Stephen and Val, thank you so much for that stimulating discussion. It's been really interesting. And may I also thank all those who help out behind the scenes, Fran, who does the recording, Magua, who did the co-hosting with me this evening, and as always, Ellie and Val and all our friends who work so hard to make this a reality. So if you'd like to join us, those who can stay on for a while, let's go over onto the deck.